Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another chapter happy hour. This one is hosted exclusively on the brand new PF and QF Chapter Leaders YouTube page. I'm Will Clayton. That hasn't changed. I'll be your host and moderator, and joining me for today's conversation is Erins Kuehl, the Director of Seed Operations. Thanks for joining me, Erin.
Hey, good to see you again, Will.
You bet. So a bit of housekeeping for the folks watching at home. Obviously, Erin and I are live now, but you're going to be watching a recording of this. So we aren't going to be having any live Q&A. However, feel free, if you have questions as Erin and I's conversation goes on, put those in the comments below. I'll be monitoring the comments. Anything I can't answer over the next couple of weeks, we'll get over to Erin, and we'll also have my contact information, Erin's contact information, and Erin, your team too, I believe, will put all of that in the link in the description of this YouTube video, and we will do the best we can to answer any and all questions that come up. So a little change, but change is good. We still do have live chapter hour happy hours coming, but we're going to mix in a few pre-recorded with live. So that's where we're at right now. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get a little bit of background on you, Erin. I think some of the Minnesota chapter leaders that are going to be watching this at home may recognize your face, but you've worn a few hats within the organization. Talk about your path to your position now and what it means to be the Director of Seed Operation.
Sure. So, I started working for Pheasants Forever 20 years ago. Celebrated this April, my 20th year with PF.
Congratulations.
And my path to get there started, I did an undergraduate research work at South Dakota State University, so go Jackrabbits out there. Did my master's work in animal ecology, studying predator movements down at Iowa State, and so cyclones, I guess, go there. So that's how I got to PF. Started with PF out of graduate school as a regional biologist at the time. The position was called essentially regional representatives for Southern Minnesota. Did that for 8 years from 01 to 08, and then came down to Illinois as the state coordinator, I guess the position is called. It used to be a conservation director, but yeah, state coordinator. Did that for about 8 more years. And then in 2016, after working a lot on state programs with seed, then I started working just exclusively on the national seed program. So as the Director of Seed Operations.
Gotcha. Well, I never would have scheduled this had I known you were a jackrabbit. Being a bison myself, I think we'll be able to get through, but ladies and gentlemen watching at home, we're going to have to cut this one short. Just bear with us.
We might.
Well, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that information for you. I always like to get the background for myself and the folks listening at home. It's congratulations on 20 years. That's pretty exciting. I bet that whether you were the director or not, you've seen the seed program evolve over the years, right? And I bet there's probably some folks at home that have been volunteering longer than you've worked here, and they've seen that as well. So maybe if you can talk about how the program's evolved. I think the first project we did at Pheasants Forever might have been a food plot, or that was our main focus in the 80s, and take us into the comprehensive program that you and your team kind of have developed now.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Will. So chapters likely started with food plots. I mean, we didn't do a lot other than that in the first early years. It was a great way to get some projects on the ground, easy to do, and really friendly for landowners, cooperators. And we had a national food plot program starting in the late 80s. And that was kind of where we cut our teeth. By the early 1990s, folks had developed the signature series food plot mixes. So some of those, and those have continued to grow along with the organization. And also in the early 90s was really when we first started to do native seed programs for CRP type projects. Started those kind of more as state programs. So Iowa, Nebraska were the first of its kind for that. And then as the years went by, we added states like Ohio, Illinois, Minnesota. We had the Habitat Forever program, so we had specialists using it there too. And that model of the native seed program just continued to grow up until it became, a half a dozen states and then 12 states. And now we've got seed mixes designed for essentially every state, continental state in the US.
Incredible. So signature series developed in the 90s, obviously the native seed is that sort of the bulk of the business now, or where do you see most of the inquiries coming in, and where does the team spend the most of their time?
It kind of depends on the time of year for one. So
Sure.
September, as all the chapter guys or many of the habitat folks on the chapters are going to recognize, that's the month that we've historically collected their requests for dated seeds, sorghum, and soybeans, and also done pre-orders for some of our signature series. So that typically goes on September, and then we're chasing down some of the chapters into October, assimilating kind of our overall requests that we send to our partners and get that out kind of late fall, early winter. And then starting in March, then we're worried about delivery on those pre-orders, those fall pre-orders, both on the dated side and the signature series. And that stretches from March into May, and in a couple years, even into the first week of June on some of those products and drop points. We try to get those out as early as possible, but we're not in control of the dated programs like we are in the other ones. So.
I do think that's probably important. So the bulk of our viewers or listeners, they're chapter volunteers. And, obviously I'm a regional representative here in Minnesota, and we've got our team across the US. And I get asked, it seems like, randomly throughout the year, hey, when is the food plot seed sign up coming on? And I know you just touched on it, but for the listeners at home, when should they start thinking about that? If they still have a chapter led, you consider the dated seed what I'm using as food plot, correct? Or
Sure.
It's your annual grains, right? It's corn and forage beans, sorghum, that sort of thing. We're not talking signature series, correct?
For the most part, chapters do pre-order their signature series at the same time, just so it all ships at once. So they've got it. Most chapters that are doing this, or a lot of chapters, are hosting a seed day sometime in the spring to get that seed out to their local cooperators. So we try to get as much of that as soon as possible to those folks. Obviously, we have some obstacles sometimes on the dated program itself. But yeah, so I guess going back to your question is, when should chapters start thinking about it? And I think those that are most on top of it at their banquet events have a sign-up sheet for their sponsors, members, like if they're interested in those products. And they're capturing that probably a year in advance, right? So if they're doing a spring banquet, they're doing it at their spring banquet, ordering the following fall, and then delivering that next spring. But it's widely varied, as you know. Chapters all do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, most definitely. I just, if we've got the attention of chapters all across the country, understanding how most of them do it, and if they're thinking about developing a program, whether it's using the dated seed, the signature series, or even native seed, which I think we'll get into a little bit later, that time frame is that, especially with the dated, you're making that order in the fall, but it's, you want to start thinking about it ahead of time. It's not something that, we're not Amazon, right? There's no Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever Prime membership, correct?
Right. Yeah. There's no 2-day shipping on it.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be. And honestly, you mentioned the native side, and on the native side, we do, and even the signature series products, we talk about shipping times between that 5 and 10 day mark. And that's pretty consistent throughout the year. In the spring, come March, April, when shipping gets really crunched because our suppliers are, putting out more orders than they can handle, then it might stretch that 10 to 14 days. But sometimes, seeds with, you order it, it ships that same day, and you have it 2 days later, whatever that freight is.
So that's a really interesting point. And one, I don't know that, that folks are that familiar of it. We've talked, you've got sort of 3 silos of seeds that your team sort of manages, and within that, there's a lot of different varieties and branding and mixes and that sort of thing. If a chapter is having a meeting in January, February, March, and they want to do a habitat project in the spring, we can accommodate that. That's not something you need to plan a year out in advance. Like, let's say they want to do a hands-on habitat event, right? So they're going to the chapter's going to go out, get their hands dirty. They're going to invite their membership and have a day. That if we're going to plant native seed, pollinator habitat, that sort of thing, we can get them that seed, like you said, in 5 days, or maybe in the spring when it's crunch time. Would you say about a 2-week window or something? Correct?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that would extend to the signature series food plot products as well, because right now we have those all pre-mixed ahead of time in January, this time of year, December, January. And so they're on a shelf ready to be shipped out. So when they order a bag of Covey Rise, as long as it's not during the pre-order time, and folks that do that know that there are 2 different codes there. But if they were to do that today, they would have that, next week for sure.
I love that. So we're talking a lot about, ordering and the mixes and things. So if I'm a chapter leader or just somebody interested in on my own property, putting in a food plot or doing some sort of habitat improvement, and I want to work with Pheasants Forever Quail for the seed program, where's the best place to go? And let's go there right now, you and I, and talk through, it's the website or?
Yep. Yeah. So pfhabitatstore.com. So like Pheasants Forever, habitatstore.com. And that is just a web portal that we put our standard mixes on. So we've got a team of biologists that build mixes to meet certain standards. We've got our food plot products on there as well, and even some fun things for E&O or education outreach events like the pollinator pigeon or conservation clays, if you're aware of those. We put little seed in the top of it, you shoot it, disperses the seed. A lot of fun to do that. So we've got fun products like that, as well as the actual habitat products. Again, it's kind of a web portal setup. We're not Amazon, but they can certainly order fairly easily and find what they need on that site.
Yeah, I'm here right now, and I'm assuming a lot of folks, once they hear that, they're going to go to it, even if they aren't familiar with it. But it's intuitive as can be. Food plot, regional mixes, right-away mixes, and then the promotional items. This is something that was new to me. I guess I hadn't thought about it, but you get a lot of chapters that are looking for things. The Take Habitat home brochures. Those are great things to have at banquets, right? Plant your own little pollinator patch in your backyard, and it's a great little bit of habitat that you can include in a sponsor package or in a gift bag for kids at banquets, and all that's ordered right there. And of course, the conservation clay kit. I have never personally done that, but if I could hit a clay, I think that would be pretty fun to do.
Yeah, Google pollinator pigeons sometime. It'll be fun to watch. It's just interesting. That Take Habitat home brochures too, from a chapter perspective, we've got a number of those that are more urban kind of chapters that really like those because they can hand them out. We've got the same thing with conservation districts if they're in that urban interface or suburban interface, that they're like, well, we want to talk about habitat. Here's something really small and easy to hand someone to talk about our favorite issue and the mission of habitat.
I like that. And so, pollinator, we've been hearing about this for a long time. Obviously, it's an important initiative of the organization, creating pollinator habitat. Not only does it improve pollinators, but it's wildlife habitat altogether, right? And so, our chapter leaders, our regional reps, everybody, we've got a varying degree of folks. I've got a biology background, but you've got, when I'm looking here, you've got a Midwest pollinator plus a Mid-South and Eastern. What does somebody need to know? Use Illinois, for instance. What does somebody need to know when they're going through this website? How do they order? What do they need to avoid? Certain species grow better or grow better in certain areas of the country. Mixes are built to do better in certain areas of the country. Is that all laid out in here? Is there some sort of key code that we need to do? Or, think about somebody that doesn't have a natural resource background. They're going to be able to get what they need here, or, tell our listeners where we can get the answers they need.
Yeah. So if it's a CRP type of project, so they're participating in some sort of USDA program, what we try to do on the biology end is we build the mixes that, one, meet those standards for the appropriate practice, 2 are going to provide great wildlife habitat, and then 3 is affordability. So we want to make sure that a general cooperator can decide to choose what we would consider a better quality mix instead of a very basic, low diversity, potentially introduced species mix. And want them to make that comparison based on, oh, these aren't that different in price. So we keep our prices low so we get better habitat on the ground. And if they're coming for a particular project, the first place they should look is under their state. So if they were from Illinois, they should click on the Illinois tab, and then we would have our suite of pre-designed or standardized mixes that we start from. And a lot of the times those are going to be exactly what they need. They just need to kind of filter through. If they're not sure, they can certainly call one of the team, email us, and we'll get them in the right place. We've also got partners in those local offices with soil and water conservation districts. And a lot of the times they're working closely with them and can be, pointed right at the right mix from there too. And of course, we do custom mixes. We do quotes if they're being designed locally as well. So we'll do it all. We like to have something available for not only cooperators in our chapters, but even the resource professionals, those district offices, so they know roughly what kind of mixes are available and what those costs might be.
And I think you touched on something there. These mixes are backed by this brand and the Quail Forever. I mean, we're the habitat organization, right? You're gonna get there isn't gonna be cheap filler in here, right? These are gonna be high quality mixes. Our goal as an organization is to create high quality wildlife habitat, right? And the mixes that you and your team provide are gonna do just that. So it's almost like Tommy Boy, the guarantees on the box, right? But that's really what we're dealing with here, right?
Yeah, you're right. I had a little giggle to myself when you said cheap filler, because we're starting to promote, because the quality of the seed is higher, and that's just not us, but the industry is cleaner seeds, less weeds, all that stuff. Like the weight of the seed has gone from like 8 to 10 pounds to the acre to 1 to 4, and a lot of the equipment isn't set to do that. So cheap filler, we like to propose rice hulls, which is a very inexpensive filler. It's inert, and it just helps stuff flow through. So I had a giggle when you said that, but yes, generally, like, we're trying to get the high quality habitat. That's our mission. That's why we got in the industry in the first place. Like, we wanted to make sure the prices stayed low and the mixes were doing what we wanted them to for pheasants, quail, pollinators, and the suite of other wildlife.
Yeah, that was I was thinking about that, and I was like, you need something to get it to go through the drill. I remember that from the days when I would put wildlife habitat in.
Sure.
But my point was, it's not going to be full of weed seed or something that came from South America that's not going to grow in your region, right?
Right.
This is a quality product that you're getting. So I think we got that point across. I do want to transition. Obviously, this is going to be posted to the PFQF Chapter Leaders YouTube page. We're getting more folks that are watching this every day. It seems like we just launched it in December, and this is a chapter-centered conversation that we're having. And the way, I'd like you to expand a little bit on the partnerships that chapters can do or engage in with the seed program. I mean, you've got chapters that are generating revenue through the seed program, and obviously those chapters can take that revenue and deliver the mission of the organization with it. But in a day and age where putting a banquet on is difficult, right? And everybody is so busy. Talk a little bit about the partnership opportunity that a chapter can have with the seed program. I think this is really a unique opportunity.
Yeah, so one of the things we found out really early is we do want to improve fundraising for our chapters and other partners like conservation districts. So we came up with a partners program for chapters and those folks. And at the lowest end, it's a 10% off for our chapters, right? So if they purchase the seed through us, they're going to get 10% off the retail. They can then sell it at retail and make 10%. So some chapters, like you said, have really taken this and they're promoting CRP in their counties. They're doing it at their banquets, and they're making tens of thousands on the revenue net end So something similar to maybe some of their banquets. Some have even told me they're making more through seed sales than they are through their banquets. And in the process, they're guaranteeing that quality habitat is going in on the ground at the same time. And I mean, the type of chapter is all over the board too. So we have some chapters that they've got volunteers sitting on drills and doing the seed like that. We've got other chapters that are just kind of passing through the seed. Whatever it is, it's pretty easy to do. So once they're a partner on the program, they order it and we've got it connected to our CMS system. So it pulls the funds out of CMS for chapters. So you don't have to have a separate transaction for that. And then of course they can resell it to their customers locally at the full price. The system even will generate an invoice for their customer that basically says payable to Otter Creek, Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, whatever the case may be.
Most definitely. And I love that for a couple of reasons, right? Conservation is best sold locally, in my opinion. And the beauty of the chapter is that these are pillars of the community. These are folks that care about conservation, wildlife habitat, hunting heritage, that are living in that community for the most part. And we're putting our high quality products, we're partnering with a local chapter, which is how it should be. And then they are spreading the word and creating habitat in their local area. And I mean, that is the organization in my mind. And I really want to drive that home because, it's an extra step, it's an extra person, it's something that you have to do as a chapter volunteer, but I do think the opportunity is there to expand. And I wasn't sure how many chapters were aware of that opportunity. I know you've got plenty of partners, but now this is going to get broadcast across the country or recorded for all our chapter volunteers. And I want to make sure we get that home. So if someone's listening, they're in a heavy CRP area or they're really passionate about creating wildlife habitat and they think they can get this started, talk about your team and maybe introduce them, and then where to go with questions or where to go to just inquire about starting a partnership or ordering seed to be
sure. Yeah. So easiest, I mean, if they have questions, if they want to email seed@pheasantsforever.org, and that will go to the appropriate person. But we do have a team of 4, including myself. So I work primarily in like Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan and the South. From our regional perspective, we've got Mike Retterer. He lives in Ohio and works Ohio, Pennsylvania, kind of Great Lakes and the Northeast is his primary focus area. We've got Dave, who's centered out of Iowa, was a habitat specialist for 15 years with the organization before coming to us last year. And he is, he does kind of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri are kind of his primary. And then we've got Charlie Holtz, who's out west. He's in Utah and does all those Western states. And each of us, obviously, when I say primarily does that, like we're focused on those mixes and we build the mixes in those states. But when they call us, I mean, we're still servicing whoever calls and getting them the right information. So it's kind of nice to have that. It's a big workload at certain times of the year. The spring is absolutely insane, as folks can imagine. When they're doing habitat projects, we're doing habitat assistance on the phone for most of the day. Not to mention the ordering process. So.
Yeah, I can just about imagine. And so obviously that's the team. I'll put the contact information in the link in the description below. Technical assistance as well, right? I mean, these are, like you said, these are, a lot of them are trained biologists, or all of them are. Yep. And so I do a lot more fundraising and chapter happy hours than I do creating wildlife habitat nowadays. Mm-hmm. So even I'm not brushed up on my skills. And I've talked with Dave an awful lot out of Iowa. And, if a chapter leader can't get a hold of their regional rep or they don't have a local biologist in their community, is it fair to say if they have a habitat question, they can reach out to their team? Obviously, you're busy at certain times of the year, but just like everybody with Pheasants Forever, you'll get back to them.
Yeah, right? That is, I mean, our habitat mission is exactly what we're trying to do. So we will give advice on seedings, even if they're not buying the seed from us, if they bought it from someone else and they're encountering a problem. If they're just having questions on how to do it, how to do site prep, like these are questions we get every day. And, some of the best conversations it might be a half hour and we're talking about, hunting and dogs and their habitat project. And at the end of the day, it might be like, well, yeah, and I bought, one bag of Blizzard Buster, and I only used half of it this year because it's a small habitat project. But the conversation and just the good times we have talking to those folks, helping them with their habitat projects is well worth it. And then on the other hand, sometimes, you might have a landowner is like, hey, I got, 160 acres of CRP. I was told to, get this mix, where do I pay kind of deal. So it's widely varied. I love still giving technical assistance advice. Don't get to do it as much on the ground, just like you. We're just kind of further and further away from the on the ground stuff, but we still like to talk about it quite a bit.
Couldn't agree more. And that those conversations are what keep me going. I love it too. And I think it's one of the best parts about the organization is that everybody you talk to, we're all like-minded in some way. And it's pretty special. Well, I've kept you for half an hour. And, for those listening home, obviously this is pre-recorded. So this is usually when we would switch to Q&A and we may be able to go for another 10 or 15 minutes. That isn't the case right now. Erin, if you've got some other things maybe that I missed, feel free to reach out or feel free to mention it. But otherwise, I think we can sort of try to wrap this up unless you got any concluding thoughts here.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is there is that, on the portal for chapters, there is a seed program guide. That's a good place to start too. So that if they've got questions, that might be a good first step. Certainly calling or emailing works us well too, but something in hand, I tend to think works pretty well. And
so that chapter resource portal, is that what you're saying? And then there's a seed guide.
There should be a seed tab.
Oh, there's a seed program tab and everything. So right. Chapters are obviously familiar with there. Start there or give them a call. Either way, it doesn't matter. But hey, I appreciate you taking the time, Erin. I think this is really going to be a good one. I'm excited to get this one posted. So
thanks
really
a lot, Will.
A lot. You bet. You take care.
Have a great one.
For those of you watching at home, we're going to be back January 25th. It's going to be live. We're going to have Chris Callis and Erica Hill on. We're going to do a Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic preview. We'll see you then.